For more than 30 years, Erik Rees has dedicated himself to empowering people to use their lives to helping others. As an author, pastor, and trainer at the world-renowned Saddleback Church, Erik and his wife, Stacy, are parents of 3 amazing children. 14 years ago, they received the news no parent ever wants to hear. Their 11-year-old daughter, Jessie, had terminal brain cancer. As Jessie started her treatment, she discovered there were many other kids fighting cancer that couldn't leave the hospital. Upon hearing this news, Jessie created her fun-filled JoyJars to hand out. She also created and adopted her NEGU, Never Ever Give Up message and motto, which she loved sharing. Under the daily leadership with his wife, the Jessie Rees Foundation has become a beacon of help and hope for children impacted by cancer. Well, hello, everyone. Erik Rees, welcome to Uncommon Philanthropist.
I'm so excited to be with you. Thank you for having me.
In learning about your story, interviewed our friend David Homan, and he mentioned your nonprofit and your family's journey. I was like, that is just such in the bullseye of what I want to be covering at Uncommon Philanthropist. So your story is one of purpose and faith and family and philanthropy. Is just all of that wrapped up into one, and then there's the joy element. And I'm so delighted to have you here and so excited to share your story with my audience.
Well, again, we're just honored to be part of it and excited that we get to have this chat today and hopefully encourage some other people to never, ever give up and pursue uncommon philanthropy.
Awesome. Well, that is the goal.
Yeah.
Well, I love to start these conversations learning a little bit more about my guest. So if you could just share a little bit about your background.
Well, I don't know how far you want me to go back, but let me just say that I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and found my way down to Southern California for school, and then met a wonderful lady that said that if I was going to date her, I needed to go to church with her. So I started attending church. I didn't grow up with faith in my family at all. And so I started going to church with my girlfriend, and actually through that process came to know the Lord and got baptized. And now that girlfriend is my beautiful wife, Stacy, of 32 years. And we just get the honor of working together and spreading joy to children fighting cancer around the world.
Well, that is quite a leap from having no faith at all to becoming a pastor at one of the country's greatest churches, Saddleback Church in San Diego. So share a little bit about that part of your story.
Yeah, so when Stacy and I got married, we moved and bought our first home, and the realtor actually told us, hey, do you guys go to church? And we said yes. And they said, well, there's a church that actually just moved out of a high school gym into a tent, and it's just, a couple miles from the home you're purchasing. You guys should check it out. So Stacy and I started going to Saddleback Church in about 1994. And then I started volunteering just to get involved. Then my wife and I were leading some young married small groups. And eventually I was asked by Rick Warren to consider coming on staff. And I was like, how much do you guys pay? Because one of my goals as a young husband and a future father was I didn't want my kids to ever have to come home with a key around their neck, because that's how I came home, to an empty home by myself. And I didn't want my kids to do that. And so my wife and I were united on the fact that she would be a stay-at-home mom. And so I wanted to make sure that we would be able to still fulfill that goal. And, where God guides, God provides. And so he was able to provide us the income for me to move out of corporate America and move into full-time ministry. And it was just a beautiful time watching the church go from about 3,000 to over 30,000, watching Rick launch the Purpose-Driven Life book that, became a global bestseller, and being able to write books myself and train pastors and helping our congregation and everybody understand their unique God-given shape, and kind of their design and how to use that to be purposeful and make an impact in their lives. And so it was an incredible journey, and I'm forever grateful for the time that I had at Saddleback Church.
Well, that's so interesting that you have that background because when I was trying to figure out, I had the concept for uncommon philanthropist, but didn't really kind of have the wording. And I sat down with a person who's like a professional storyteller, and she was like, I think it's connecting people with purpose. That's ultimately what philanthropy does. And so cool that you had that ground floor opportunity where the whole country was really aligned with seeking purpose. And that book is still, it's a perennial bestseller. And I'm sure you did your job to help carry that load and spread the message too.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful, and obviously, the first sentence in the book is "It's not about you." Really helps, people take a step back and say, if it's not about me, what is life about, and how can I make the most of the time that I have on Earth?
Exactly. So powerful. So tell me about your family. So you and your wife did have the vision of a family come to life. Let's talk about those three beautiful kids of yours.
Yeah, so when Stacy and I decided to start having a family, we were blessed with our first child, a baby girl, Shea, and then a couple years later, we were blessed with our second daughter, Jessie, and then a couple years later, we were blessed with our third. But this time, I got my son,
Yeah.
and JT came in and joined our family of five. It was just a beautiful time of a young family and being able to, pray together, serve together, do all kinds of wonderful things through our church, through the school that our kids were at. All of our children were part of a very large swimming community here in Southern
Right.
California. And so those were some of the greatest, young times as a young father and as a young family.
And then if you want to tell Jesse's story a little bit about it, I mean, we don't have to go deep into it.
When I first became a father, I remember going to a Starbucks by myself and I said, okay, because I didn't have the greatest earthly father. He used to beat me up and he was an alcoholic and it was just not the greatest upbringing. And so I sat down and was like, okay, what are going to be my goals as a dad? What's going to be something that I can evaluate myself on a daily, monthly basis to make sure I'm being the dad that I wish I had had? And so I set out with two goals: to always provide and to always protect. If I could provide for my family and make sure they were safe and cared for and comfortable, and I could protect them, that was what my kind of two initial goals were. And so on March 3rd, 2011, my wife and I were told that our middle daughter, Jessie, had cancer. Obviously, the worst news any parents could ever receive is your child has cancer, but then they quickly followed it up with it's terminal and you have 12 to 18 months with her. So that was very, very trying times for us. Not only, are my two goals about providing and protecting my daughter being completely challenged, I had to be, quote unquote, the head of the house and try to keep the home as normal as it could be. My wife obviously did a superior job of caring for Jessie and caring for other kids, but it was a brutal time of watching your baby girl just be devastated by cancer. And so during that time, we got Jessie on what's called a clinical trial because there was no cure for what she had. She actually had a brain tumor in her brain stem, and only about 50 kids a year get that type of tumor. So there just wasn't a lot of opportunity for her to be cured, even though I sought, I think, 42 second opinions. All of them came back to the same results. As we got Jessie on a clinical trial at a local children's hospital here, she was outpatient. So every day, drive up, drive home, drive up, drive home. And about 3 weeks into the treatment plan, Jessie was sitting in the back seat. My wife, Stacy, was next to me, and we're leaving the parking garage. And she simply said, Mom, Dad, when do all the other kids get to come home? And I remember pointing at the third floor of the children's hospital, which was the oncology floor. And I had said, Jess, there's a lot of children that are fighting different types of cancer than you are, and they have to stay weeks and months to get their treatment. And the next statement out of her little beautiful face has changed our lives because she just basically asked us a question, 5 words: how can we help them? And To be honest, I didn't care about them. I was trying to save my daughter's life, but Jess just had this burden for children that couldn't leave the hospital. So, long story short, she came home. She started making these brown paper like lunch bags, and she would write positive words on them. She put stickers in them, and she was going to put her Beanie Babies in them and deliver them back to the kids that couldn't leave, just to try to brighten their day.
And
And
this was all her envisioning,
yeah,
correct?
this was all her idea. I said, Jess, let's talk to the hospital the next day and see if it's okay. And if it's okay, sure. So we talked to the hospital, and they said, Jesse could definitely bring in gifts for the kids. They just have to be new, age appropriate, nothing sharp, no food, no lotions, nothing that could be choked on, just normal guidelines. And they said, the brown paper bag can carry germs. So, and these children have compromised immune systems. So we shared all this with Jessie, and there was a jar sitting on our kitchen island. And she said, well, I could use a jar. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, I bet I could put toys in a jar. And so that was the very first start of what's now called JoyJars, which are 64-ounce plastic jars filled to the very top with new games, toys, and activities. And so we set up the little Joy factory in our garage for Jessie to start making these, and she would make them and deliver them to the kids. And she just loved to see the smiles on their faces and stuff. And so we started getting more and more requests for them because Jessie couldn't go to school anymore. And so she started a Facebook fan page and kind of like journaled every day. And so more and more people were following her. And so when the requests were getting so high, we decided to, create a foundation. And I asked Jessie, do you want your foundation to be about cure or to be about care? And she said, care, Daddy. And so, the Jessie Rees Foundation does not focus on curing cancer. We focus on curing bad days caused by childhood cancer. And so, Jessie continued to make her Joy Jars, and unfortunately, we got 10 months and 2 days with Jess. On January 2012, she moved to heaven, and after that time, and after her celebration of life service, where close to 9,000 people showed up to celebrate her, we sat down with Shea and JT and just said, we tried our best. We realized you guys kind of fell to the sidelines. We're sorry about that, but we did our best to try to keep our family together. And do we want to close a chapter, or do we want to write a new chapter? And I remember Jessie's sister
She was
saying,
how old at the time, Eric?
Shea was 13. She said, Dad, Jessie's motto was never, ever give up. How can we? And I was like, okay. So we put our hands over the kitchen island, all four of us, and just said 1, 2, 3 for Jess. And we haven't stopped. We've now sent over 500,000 Joy Jars to children fighting cancer in all 50 states and over 53 countries. We've given away millions of dollars in financial support to families. And we have all kinds of programs to help families. Our son, JT, is actually releasing a new short film called White Room that is about his grief journey with losing his sister. And we hope that will actually become a great way to encourage families to have conversations. Nobody, no matter what age, should sit silent in their grief. And asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. And so we really hope that we're going to now be able to help more families that are grieving to find strength to never, ever give up and keep going through the journey that they're going through. And so that's a little bit about Jessie's story and the foundation.
That is, it's beautiful, and it's tragic, and it's hope-filled, and it's a story of love and families, and, thank you for sharing that. I know it's gotta be hard to kinda relive it again and again, but what do you think drove her in the beginning to really care about those kids?
Sometimes I wish I would have asked her that because, I look back and I have to just think it had to be due to her faith. And even though she was 11 years old, she loved reading the Bible and, going to Sunday school and all those kinds of things because she truly lived out the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. Love love the Lord and love others. And so she was always a caring person. I remember one time she was going to have like her 10-year-old birthday party, and, they make invitations to give to classmates. And so we came up with a list, and she was like, well, wait a minute. There's a couple kids that even though I don't play with them on the playground, I don't want them to feel left out. So she made sure everybody was invited. When we would go to swim meets and she would swim, she was always the one that was cheering on. And if one of her teammates didn't do that great, she would try to cheer him up and stuff. So I don't know exactly why she chose to want to help. I think she just knew that there was kids that didn't get to come home, and she just wanted to brighten their day.
And families who've never lived through pediatric cancer, I don't think people realize for those kids that are inpatient, the stress that puts on the family to continue to work, to provide the care, to be in the hospital 24/7 with a sick child, and then most of them have kids at home. It is so much for them to bear, and for your foundation to come alongside those families and deliver a little bit of joy. And you've expanded the scope of what you're offering to love and serve on families. So I think it's a tremendous call, and, just keeping Jessie's legacy alive and well, and having people say her name and talk about her joy, and just the way she handled something so, so difficult for anybody. And did you find that there was therapeutic value, like in kind of figuring out the jars and making the jars and coming alongside her? And I think you had some celebrities come to the house and make some initial JoyJars in the beginning. Tell me about kind of that
Yeah.
whole getting started part of it.
Well, once we, came up with this concept of a joy jar, it was interesting. I went to GoDaddy and tried to find out if the URLs were available, and they all were. And I'm like, wow, it's been how many years that the internet's been around and nobody has joyjars.com or joyjars.org or whatever. And then I remember we wanted to get Jessie.org. And we found that this gentleman in Canada, quote unquote, owned it. And we reached out to him, and he goes, "Oh, I forgot about that. I got that from my girlfriend about 10 years ago. She's no longer my girlfriend. You guys can have it." So I was like, okay, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
Wow.
But, we worked with some friends that we had that were in the design marketing side of things, and they sat down with Jessie and tried to come up with a logo that she liked. She picked all the colors, not only for Joy Jars, but for NEGU, which is our little motto, never ever give up. And so, she loved kind of creating it and coming up with the very first designs. And then it was
Oh.
just, she would spend hours on Oriental trading and stopping by the local Target or going to some other stores to find toys that were obviously, new and age appropriate and all that, because she was not just making boy and girl jars, she was making them for, 5 different age ranges. And so, the garage filled up pretty quickly. But, then once the foundation got started and after Jess passed and we moved to a very small little building, that's where I kind of tapped into all of the things that I was learning for over 20 years of being a pastor at Saddleback, in terms of recruiting volunteers and asking for help and just getting the jars, keep getting them made and delivered and shipped. UPS was a very, very big partner for us early on. And so, they helped make sure that, the packages would get delivered on time and stuff, because Jess had certain rules. One, no air, meaning it had to pass. So what's called the shake test, meaning she would put toys in. One of the things that is the last to go in a joy jar is a beanie, because a lot of kids in the hospital lose their hair. And so she would stuff it. But if she shook it and she could hear things moving around, she felt like it needed more toys. So every time the joy jars get made, they still go through the shake test. No cheesy toys. She didn't like anything cheesy in the jar, and then ship them fast. And so, we still send, jars every week out of the Joy Factory here in Irvine, California. But yeah, I mean, I just had a lot of wonderful people come around and say, "How can we help?" And that was the greatest gift that people could help us, as we were, still trying to grieve the loss of Jess and try to create some level of normalcy for Shay and JT in our home. And we were going through family counseling and just trying to do anything and everything, because there's no book on Amazon to really buy to help you through what you're going through. So you tap into, obviously, we tapped into the church, we tapped into friends, we tapped into our small group and our community to really support us during our greatest time of need.
I think that's kind of a bigger message is community, find your people. As God forbid that some type of tragedy does strike, it just makes all the difference in the world to have the love and care of people around you who bring you meals, and it doesn't even, I'm praying for you. I mean, the prayers, people always say I'm praying for you, and when you're going through something like that, you feel it.
Yeah,
And you're
absolutely.
very thankful for those prayers. It's a supernatural thing that occurs. As a pastor, I'm sure you can articulate on that much better than I.
Well, no, prayer matters, obviously, but, to be completely transparent, my faith was challenged to the core.
Mhm.
Preached
I get it.
I preached on, heaven all the time and Easter messages and different types of things. And now it's like, oh my gosh, you know,
Yeah.
it became super, super real that my daughter is there. And, another thing that I had to finally come to grips with is it just helps me embrace everything that has gone on in our family. But is that I was serving as Jesse's earthly father.
Mhm.
I had the gift of being her dad for almost 12 years, but she's with her heavenly father. And so I just got the chance to steward her as her earthly father. And knowing that she's with her heavenly father gives me great peace.
It never would have been long enough.
No,
Never would have
no,
been
I
long
can't
enough.
wait to see her someday. But until that time, I got a lot of joy to spread.
And that is the promise of heaven, that's the promise of faith, and it's that whole leap of faith. I mean, for people who don't believe, it just sounds so fantastic. But we believe we have a roadmap that points right up there, and where that's I believe that's where joy comes from. Joy originates in heaven, and we are whole and complete when we all return to our Abba Father.
Amen.
That's such an amazing story. So let's talk about the foundation today. And you guys are doing your, so I understand your daughter is part of the team, your wife, your son has just created this amazing documentary that I can't wait to see. So it's got to be healing for everybody to be united and working together and continuing to share joy. Help us understand what some of the things you've got going on today, Eric.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm so grateful my daughter left me pain mean purpose for my pain because I get to wake up every morning doing something and helping others, which is a beautiful thing. We choose every day to wade into the waters of childhood cancer and extend arms of love and hope and joy. And so, what when initially we started with JoyJars because that's what Jess had created, and she had asked Stacy and I one day, how cool would it be if every kid received a Joy Jar and was encouraged to never ever give up? And so knowing that, now she never, I didn't ask her, you mean every kid at Chalk? So she could have thought every kid at Chalk, but she just said every kid. And so our mission is to encourage every kid fighting cancer to never ever give up. And so, from a strategy standpoint, it starts with a Joy Jar because of HIPAA. I can't download a database of children fighting cancer in America, but I do know where all the children's hospitals are, where all the Ronald McDonald houses are, where all the oncology camps and these other just amazing charities around the world that support children fighting cancer. And so we just build relationships with them, and so we have this global network that we use for distribution. And so Joy Jars go out. Inside of the Joy Jars is information for the family to come back to our website and sign up for what's called Club NEGU. Now, obviously, it's a club that nobody wants to be part of, but when you hear your child has cancer, you're glad there's a community that you can join and be supported by. And so that is basically like a 12 to 18-month encouragement program for the courageous kid, for the super siblings, and for the parents, because we realize that cancer impacts everybody. I mean, like, for example, one of the boosts that goes out for families in Club Nigu is a Super Sib surprise box. And even the reason why we added that was one day I asked Shea, how are you doing? And this is when Jessie was fighting cancer. And she said, I'm jealous. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, well, everybody comes over to bring things for Jessie. What about JT and I? And I was like, wow, that's a reality. And so we want to at least solve that a little bit by making sure that siblings receive a box of toys on their doorstep with their name on them so they feel included. We even now have a Super Sib Joy Jar just for siblings. And so, you know, Joy Jars start the relationship. Club Nigu starts to strengthen the relationship with these families. And then we have a smartphone app called iNigu that delivers daily video encouragement from celebrities, professional athletes, and all kinds of other wonderful people to remind them every day to never, ever give up. And, it was so cool when we were with Jennifer Gardner, who was one of the people that submitted a video, and she's like, "Can I speak to moms?" And I'm like, "You can speak to whoever."
Yeah.
And so she, just recorded this very, very personal message to encourage moms. And within the app, once you watch a video, you can actually record a video and send a message back. And so, it's just great to see that these videos are encouraging not only the kid but the entire family, and they don't feel alone. Jess used to always say, "Dad, I feel lonely and limited," and those are two things that I want to make sure no kid ever feels is alone or limited. And so, making them feel like they have people out there that they see on TV or see playing football on Sundays makes them feel included. For example, like this wristband is worn by several professional football players and mostly quarterbacks. But, when kids tell us like, "Hey, I saw Patrick Mahomes wearing the same bracelet that I wear," they
That's
feel
cool.
like he's on their team kind of thing. And then we have a program called Hope for the Holidays where we give families $1,000 check to help them during the holidays. And that's kind of our ability to help families financially. We have a program called the House of Hope, which is a home in here in Southern California that we send families to for free vacations and allows them to break away from treatment, have fun, smile, create memories, which is so important. And we're actually going to be expanding the House of Hope to other states in the next couple years to offer and provide support for more families. Right now, we're looking at some places in Arizona and some places in outside Dallas, Fort Worth. It's important to us as part of our
Mhm.
strategy for houses is that there's 3 to 4 major children's hospitals within 2 hours. So we have a population to be able to welcome to the house. So
Mhm.
that's another program that we have. And then for families like ours that have a child in heaven, we have a program called Memory Canvases. They're 30 by 30-inch wrap canvases that, when the time is right, because every family grieves differently, they get the opportunity to submit 27 words about their son, daughter, brother, or sister. And then we have an artist that takes those words along with the child's name. There's different colors the family can pick from and stuff. And then we deliver to them this beautiful canvas that can hang in their home because, like Stacy and I, all we have left is memories of Jess. And so being able to help families anchor those memories for them, we are honored to do that for them.
Such a thoughtful array of services. And you mentioned earlier that you didn't have that book that you needed, and you have written a book called Never Ever Give Up. Talk to us about who you hope picks up that copy and who you hope it.
Well, actually, I would say, I believe anybody could benefit from the book because Jesse's motto, "Never ever give up," isn't one just for children or families impacted by cancer. We all have trials, challenges in our lives. And, even Philippians 4:13 says, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength." So we have the power to keep going no matter what the hurdle in front of us is. And being able to have a community around you to keep going and to keep supporting you when you feel defeated, it's important. And so the book was written, one, to bring awareness to childhood cancer, because, to be honest, before March 3rd, 2011, I didn't have any clue about 400,000 children are diagnosed with cancer every year, and
Big
every
number.
seven hours a child loses their fight to cancer. And so, it's just these sad, sad statistics that I would hope people would create awareness of this terrible situation. And then again, just provide encouragement. Even in the back of the book, I provide 25 things to help families. If you ever come across a family that has a child fighting cancer, or really a family that's fighting any sort of illness, the best thing is to show up and don't say a lot. Sometimes the ministry of presence is the best thing. And, praying for them, showing up, offering to support is really the greatest things. I remember one of the greatest gifts that I got from a buddy of mine was one day we were at home with Jess and the doorbell rang and I opened it up and my friend was outside and he said, "Give me your car keys." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "I'm going to go get your oil changed and wash your car for you." And I was like, that's the last thing on my list. That wasn't a priority. it needed to get done. And so, just simple things like that, remember that the entire family could use a boost of joy, not just the child, because everybody is trying to figure out how to survive and how to create normalcy in their family during these extremely challenging times.
So much to learn. And I know well meaning people also say some things that they probably shouldn't. So, any insight into kind of coaching us to be better, kinder, loving people when we're walking with somebody?
Well, everybody comes from it with a good heart. But I remember several people used to say to me, Jesse's in a much better place now. I always would look outside and I was like, this is a beautiful place we live. Yes, she's in heaven. I get that. But it really didn't minister to me and didn't really help me at my greatest time of need to tell me my daughter's in a better place now. I understand the intent, but the message probably just wasn't really what I needed to hear. And I know other people don't find comfort in that. The other thing is to understand when you're going to talk to somebody that is going through a challenging time, to say, how are you, is a beautiful quest. But just realize that saying, how are you, puts a burden on the person to mentally go through the question of, do you really want to know? They're not going to say that typically, unless they're very, very close. But it if they're not really wanting to hear how they're doing, it doesn't really help the person get out and talk. And so, just be prepared to say, I'd love to hear more about how things are going. Tell me about your day. How can I pray for you? Instead of just how are you? Because chances are they're not doing great, but they don't really want to put that burden on you and spill everything coming out inside of them. So just, be cautious and concerning when it comes to asking certain questions. And the ministry of presence is sometimes the best thing, of just showing up and helping in any way you can.
Sit down and have coffee and
Yep.
talk. Just open up the conversation.
Yeah. And I think, for families that have lost a child, being able to say something like, tell me a story about your son or your daughter. There is a natural burning desire in a family that has lost a child that they would never be forgotten, because life moves on. Initially, you had all these people praying for you and supporting you and coming to your house and all that kind of stuff. And then Jesse, passes, and a lot of those people, stop showing up. There was other people that obviously brought food and those kinds of things, but being able to hear and talk about your child helps you feel like they're still with you and people are thinking about them versus they forgot about them. And so I think that's also a powerful thing, just to be able to ask families or even siblings, if it's age appropriate, tell me a little bit more about your sister. What was her favorite color? Just simple things that it is a desire of us to talk about our child, but we also don't just want to go around and just, hey, guess what? I'm going to tell you everything about Jesse today.
So you need the person opposite you to open up those conversations gently, should you be in the mood to talk about them. I think a lot of times people are just not great communicators and they're afraid to say something for fear of upsetting you. And I think that usually doesn't happen. It's like, let's just, and I think that's part of being a good philanthropist, is being kind and intuitive and wanting to engage to help the person opposite you that's hurting. I mean, to me, that is love of humanity and showing up to be there for the people that you love and care about in some very dark hours. I mean, that is truly an unbelievable form of philanthropy. So I know people are learning from your words of wisdom and just speaking from your heart on how we can love better in times of trouble. And we can't wish it away or make it better, but just knowing people are in there with you and that they care, I think really means a lot.
Yeah. And I would just challenge your viewers, as I challenge corporations when I go and speak at their events, is one thing learned from Jess: if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And so, think about what Jesse's question was to Stacy and I: how can we help them? Well, if you took that statement and said, how can I help them? Then just pursue whoever your them is. It could be your neighbor. It could be a classmate. It could be a coworker. It could be veterans. It could be homeless. It could be all, there's so much opportunity. And I think the challenge is that you need to choose to stand for something. Because if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And we all should try to find something to stand for and serve and help and make the world a better place, no matter if it's a smaller group or a larger group. I don't focus on, well, I can only help one or two people. You don't know, those one or two people were the right people for you to help that day. So don't get caught up in the numbers. Just make a choice and stand for something and extend arms of love and hope and joy, because we all have the ability to do it every day of our lives.
Exactly. Well, you've teed up my closing question, and that is my tagline is let go. And Eric, I'd love for you to preach us out with a rousing let go, and then close us out on being people of action in times of trouble. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. But, as I think about let's go, I would first ask somebody to say, what's preventing you to go? What is causing you to not go? Is it something mentally? Is it something that is just not a priority? So you need to check your heart. You have the ability every day to help somebody. And so what's holding you back from going? Get rid of that, make a decision, and choose one person, just one person, to make an impact and better the life of one person. And then you will feel so fulfilled and you will want to do it again and again and again. So yes, let's go.
And I can imagine when your daughter first said, "Let's make these joy jars," you were probably like, "Oh, really?" With all that's going on, and but you said, "Let go," and y'all made it happen, and you gave her purpose and meaning in doing it. And I'm sure you wouldn't trade those days of being shoulder to shoulder, figuring out the joy jars and just seeing the joy in her, like shaking the jar, her quality control. It's like,
Yeah.
stuff in there. I mean, I feel like I know your beautiful daughter and her spirit, and I thank you so much for sharing your family's unbelievable story of hardship, but hope and faith and family. Eric, how can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Yeah. People can jump over to NEGU .org, and that's where there's all kinds of ways to get involved. And again, philanthropy doesn't need to be money. It can be, how do you use your talents and your time? So figure out what you can do to make the world a better place. If you want to support children fighting cancer, jump over to our website, but choose something and let's make the world a better place together.
That's for sure. And if you live in sunny San Diego, it looks like you're always doing amazing fundraising events. So get connected, sign up for the email, follow. You have a very robust social media presence. And I think your sweet daughter is cheering you on from heaven. And I just thank you so much for your time, Eric, and for what you're doing.
Thank you, and God bless you.
You too. Take care. So good.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.